From the heart of Central Florida, you are listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. And I'm so glad to be with you, everyone. This is David Gornoski, your host, and we're going to have a wonderful program as we do each and every day here in our flagship town here in beautiful Central Florida. We're coming to you on 10:40 a.m. Make sure you save it for your news that you want to get every day, Monday through Friday, across Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg, and Sarasota, and into Central Florida. Then you always have our friends in Orlando on News Radio Orlando at the iHeart station there, and our growing national audience that has been following my work at all the major news publications that carry my columns. Just search for David Gornoski on your favorite search engine and find out what we're doing online as well. It's always exciting to have another time to break through toxic groupthink, break through old ideas, and provide people with practical solutions and game-changing opportunities for breakthroughs in our lives. So joining me is someone who's a friend of the program. He's one of my first guests I have on terrestrial radio and broadcast, and he's a professor at Boston College, and he is a pioneer in using a metabolic approach to the treatment of cancers, including some of the hardest cancers to treat in the world. And he uses non-toxic therapies that target our energy process in the body, not focusing on old paradigms that don't work. That is our friend, Dr. Thomas Seyfried. How you doing?
I'm doing well, David. Thank you very much.
And great to hear from you. I hope you're doing well in this bizarre time. How are you guys doing over there in Boston?
Well, you know, the universities have all been basically shut down for the most part, and just a few, essential activities that might be going on. But most of the research labs are still shut down. We can keep a few of the essentials going, but basically we're not doing very much wet lab work at all.
Wow, so you've got a kind of a different change of pace going on then, huh?
Yeah, well, we're kind of sheltering at home. I'm on sabbatical this semester, but many of my colleagues have been teaching using Zoom technology, teaching the students online. It's kind of sad because many of the seniors will be missing their graduation and their senior weeks and all this. But it's the price you pay for the current situation. I don't know what the story will be in the fall, but we may still continue to teach some classes online depending on the size of the classes and things. So we'll have to wait and see.
So have you guys been able to do anything new or any new milestones or research with your work on cancer using the different ketogenic and other processes that you're using?
Yeah, well, our paper on breast cancer came out a couple of weeks ago, where we went through the details of how to use ketogenic metabolic therapy or therapeutic ketosis for managing breast cancer. So we went through the details on that. That's now open access, so anyone could read it. It's in Frontiers in Nutrition. So in that paper, we outlined again, how this basically, as I said for years, all these cancers are basically the same disease. Cancer is a singular disease of energy metabolism. So what works for glioblastoma will work for breast cancer, for colon cancer, pancreatic cancer, prostate cancer. They're all basically the same. So we just drive home the message of the similarities between all the different tumors and how they would respond from a starvation of their 2' fermentable fuels, which is basically glucose and glutamine.
And that's a pretty revolutionary thing, because when you talk to a lot of folks in medicine, they'll say, well, no, cancer is extremely complex and there's no one therapeutic approach that will work for everyone. You've always got to have a totally different thing for different ones. Is that, you don't agree with that, huh?
Well, that's due to a fundamental lack of knowledge on the biology of the disease. And the other thing it's due to is an indoctrination that cancer is a genetic disease. And when you view cancer as a genetic disease, then those statements are in fact correct. It's unbelievably complicated, bewilderingly complicated, because every cell in the tumor has a different genetic signature, different genetic mutations in this. So if you look at it from the perspective of a genetic disease, yes, it's extremely complicated. But when you look at it from the perspective of a biological metabolic disease, it's very simple. All the tumor cells essentially have a very similar problem. They can't use oxidative phosphorylation, and they become dependent on fermentation. So the strategy is remove the fermentable fuels, and you have a great chance of killing or eliminating the tumors while maintaining the health and vitality of the normal cells of the body. This strategy will eventually come to be recognized as the management for the disease.
How many folks do you have a rough estimate are waking up to that revelation that you've seen, that cancer can be treated from a metabolic standpoint rather than a genetic focus?
Yeah, well, I think it's happening gradually. It takes time for the concepts to sink in to the general consciousness of the field. So, when you have an entrenched doctrine, a particular view, it takes years sometimes to overturn that. And but we and others, and there's many clinical trials now from the government that are starting to evaluate the use of metabolic approaches for managing cancer. So it's coming slowly. You'd like to have it come a little faster, but like anything, it's very hard to overturn a paradigm, and it just takes time.
And I think you've told me before that it's very difficult to do proper trials too with your approach, because of course the way it's designed in America, you have to do the standard of care, which is the toxic chemo, radiation, and surgery modalities first, right?
Well, that's again part of the standard of care. It's an established procedure that's used, not only in the United States but pretty much throughout the world. Where it's happening a little bit is that metabolic therapy is being combined with some aspects of standard of care. For glioblastoma, we published a big paper saying that we think the patients would do far, far better if we did metabolic therapy as an alternative, especially to radiation, because we've shown evidence now it's the radiation that's largely responsible for the demise of the patients. They just can't. Their neurons and cells are bathed in glucose and glutamine, causing a rapid recurrence and demise. But if we could, and there again, to make a big advance, you'd have to say, well, we're not going to use radiation. Well, radiation is a major treatment modality, generates massive revenue, and it's very hard to get people to recognize that when their salaries depend on them not recognizing it. So again, you have a lot of obstacles before this procedure can be fully recognized and adapted to the clinic.
And another cancer researcher who has a similar approach to yours, a little bit different, but he has the same view that cancer is a problem with metabolic or mitochondria issues, not the genetic approach of the old paradigm. Professor Michael Assanti in Salford University, I talked to him recently, and he was saying that, one of the things with chemotherapy that's a problem is that it creates a prevalence of dysfunctional senescent cells, these aging cells, which are often the fuel for cancer. These senescent cells tend to be one of the primary, one of the primary mechanisms by which cancer can come about in the body in a bad way, right?
Well, the senescent cells, we damage a lot of our cells with the treatments that we use to manage the disease. Let's be honest. Ketogenic metabolic therapy avoids all of that. It avoids the damage to the normal cells. And this is what's really important. It keeps the vitality of our normal cells at a very high state of metabolic efficiency while hammering and depriving the tumor cells of their fermentable fuels. So, yes, in a way, if you do standard of care, how healthy is our body going to be after we have been bombarded by massive doses of radiation and toxic poisons? Not healthy. I mean, if we took normal people and did this to them, their lifespan would be shortened simply because we damage the vitality of the normal cells. So if we had a therapy that would selectively destroy the tumor cells while enhancing the vitality of the normal cells, preventing a senescence phenotype, then this would be the most ideal approach to managing the disease. And this is the paradigm change that has to take place.
We're talking with Dr. Thomas Seyfried of Boston College, someone who I believe to be a Galileo for the work of oncology in our time today, someone who's willing to challenge the whole establishment and say this is a better way. And he's got a lot of friends around the world who are joining him in this cause so that we can find a real formula to defeat cancer without so much toxicity. We don't have to rely on some of the older paradigms if we have the proper attention to this pathway using therapeutic ketosis. You've heard that word ketosis, but there's a way that it can be done in a controlled medical way that might open up a whole new paradigm of medicine. Let's continue live with Dr. Seyfried on A Neighbor's Choice.
Guys, the physicians and staff at Center for Men's Health want you to know that C4MH.com is open and will remain open throughout this whole ordeal. C4MH.com has taken a multitude of steps to make sure that their offices are the safest places that they can possibly be. And here are just a few of the items that make that statement a fact. C4MH.com treats all offices with Microban 24. Now, that's the most advanced antivirus disinfectant available today. And unlike any other disinfectant, Microban 24 kills viruses for 24 hours after application, touch after touch. The staff wears level 1 procedure mask, and you can have one too. They also monitor their temperatures, and soon they'll do the same for you when you walk in the door. All their pens and clipboards are antimicrobial, and when you walk in, you will use hand sanitizer. C4MH.com prepared for this early so that both their staff and patients remain safe. Safe is the way it's always been at C4MH. I'm a patient at C4MH.com, and I know safety is their first concern.
Our friends at Phillips Custom Woodworking Incorporated are on the air reminding Americans to stand tall and show support to the brave men and women of our U.S. military. This proud salute from Phillips Custom Woodworking Incorporated, our area's most trusted woodworker. For residential or commercial projects, build-outs, molding, and much more, give the pros a call today at 941-650-7753, 941-650-7753. Backed by 39 years of experience, that's Phillips Custom Woodworking Incorporated. On the air because they care.
This message is sponsored by the Florida A&M University Medical Marijuana Education and Research Initiative, the Florida Association of Broadcasters, and this radio station.
Where I'm from, marijuana is legal. Can I use it in Florida?
Nah, it's illegal here. 20 grams or less is a misdemeanor, and more than 20 grams is a felony.
Well, I have epilepsy. Should I try to get a medical marijuana prescription?
Now that's legal, but talk to your doctor first to see if it's a qualifying condition and if medical marijuana is even right for you.
I will, thanks.
And now, All Fields Construction is reminding Americans to stand tall and show support to the brave and honorable men and women who serve our U.S. military. This salute is brought to you by All Fields Construction, serving the area with quality, integrity, and pride. So don't delay. Call the pros today at 813-447-7111. That's 813-447-7111. That's All Fields Construction, proudly saluting our troops and veterans. They are professionals who care.
The following message is sponsored by the Florida Department of Elder Affairs, the Florida Association of Broadcasters, and this radio station.
As prescription costs rise, many Medicare beneficiaries are having difficulty keeping up. The Florida Department of Elder Affairs SHINE program may be able to help. SHINE counselors can guide you to money-saving programs, including one that may help pay your Medicare Part D costs. For more information, call 1-800-963-5337 or go to floridashine.org.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, David Gornoski. We're live. Hope you're doing well on this Friday as you enjoy, hopefully, a great weekend with family and those you care about the most, as you breathe in the fresh air of freedom that we have as our birthright in the land of the free and the home of the braves. Glad that you could be with us here. We are talking, as we do a lot on this program, about the kind of things you don't hear on the evening news, which is the pioneering research being done in the fields of places like cancer and nutrition and all kinds of other major illnesses, which unfortunately are all too prevalent in this country. Think about the war on cancer that Nixon declared. How many decades has it been, and how many fatalities do we still receive after all the billions of dollars thrown in that direction? What have we got in terms of the established approach? And just like, with Galileo, there was a reigning, ruling belief that the consensus was settled and there was no other perspective of the universe, and then it went away. And that's what we're doing right now. We're talking to someone on the front lines of fighting cancer without relying on toxic things that don't seem to really do the real necessary hard work in and of themselves. And that's Dr. Thomas Seyfried of Boston College. So, Dr. Seyfried, I wanted to turn just a little bit to an area you do a lot with cancer, but as a biologist, I wanted to get your thoughts on this new pandemic, this virus that everybody's been talking about. Any thoughts on that overall in terms of some of the things that you've learned in your long career in biology?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the focus on has now shifted almost entirely to the COVID 2019 virus, and rightly it should. We were kind of surprised about the degree of infectivity and debilitation that it's causing. But, in our work on therapeutic ketosis and the use of ketone bodies, they target the same or many of the problems that this virus is associated with. There's clear evidence that, comorbidities contribute to the, the malignancy, not the toxicity of the virus, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and all these kinds of things. These are the prime conditions that therapeutic nutritional ketosis targets. And now there's new information actually coming out showing that those who survive the virus, there's about 30%. Big paper just came out of Nature, the journal Nature. Journal of the American Medical Association, saying that neurological complications can be seen both in the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. You've heard many people say lost smell or taste, and then there's seizures and cardiovascular strokes and these kinds of things. Well, these are all the conditions that ketone bodies, beta hydroxybutyrate, one of the key ketone bodies, they target this. They actually reduce systemic inflammation, which is underlying many of these conditions. So it's surprising to me why the medical establishment has not recognized this approach for reducing some of the conditions associated with this in a very simple way. Now, of course, there's a lot of emphasis to find a drug that will kill the virus, but at the same time, there are easy approaches that will strengthen the body to make it more resistant to the virus. So even if you have the virus, the effects of the virus would be minimized or reduced significantly if patients were in a state of therapeutic ketosis. So this, to me, is a very simple way to reduce, bring people back into the workplace much faster. Even if they have the virus, they would be quite healthy with it. Which is what we see, these people that sometimes they're called, they carry the virus but don't show the symptoms. I think ketosis could certainly enrich or increase that population of individuals.
Yeah, it was interesting to see Senator Rand Paul. He was tested positive, and he seems like he quickly recovered, and he went straight to work in a hospital working with patients with this virus. And he didn't seem to indicate any severe symptoms, hardly anything at all. And I thought that was interesting to me because, I guess he's not, I don't think he's over 60, but he's had recently surgery on his lungs when his neighbor derangedly attacked him, and he had to have pneumonia in the lungs and things like that. So I thought, I was concerned that because of his surgery and some of the fluid in the lungs he had recently, with that attack where he broke several ribs of Rand Paul, that maybe, and he didn't mention anything. So maybe there is something that we need to really take a look at. And tell folks just a little bit about what therapeutic ketosis is doing in the body to reduce that systemic inflammation and clean up some of the dysfunctional cells that the virus needs to replicate.
Yeah, well, it was clearly shown by the work of the late Richard Veach, who just unfortunately passed away earlier this year. He clearly showed with his work at the National Institutes of Health that cells that use ketone bodies, which are part of the elevation of ketone bodies, they can increase the energy of a cell with less oxygen being used, which is really incredible. And they also make fewer reactive oxygen species. In other words, you reduce systemic inflammation in the body while enhancing the energy efficiency of cells with less oxygen required. So this was a phenomenal thermodynamic finding, and it explains so many of the health benefits of therapeutic ketosis. And now we have various ketone supplements. These are ketone ester salts of ketone bodies that are almost, it's like a drug itself. Like any drug, one has to be careful in how you use it, but it jacks the ketones up and provides an efficiency. And in other words, the energy of the cells increases better with fewer damaging reactive oxygen species. So this is, we call it a super fuel. The late George Cahill, who ran the Joslin Diabetes Center up here in Boston and worked on fasting and starvation in humans, called ketones a super fuel because they would reduce the inflammation, increase the energy efficiency of cells, and this underlies, longevity, how long people live. They reduce the comorbidities associated. So clearly, it has a broad range of effects on enhancing the vitality of cells and oxygen utilization. So this seems to me to be a great way to increase lung function in individuals that might be suffering from the virus.
And is that the reduction of sugar and carbohydrates, or is it the introduction of ketones that a ketogenic therapy provides the best healing? What is it, the removal of the sugar or the addition of the ketones in the body?
In my opinion, it's the combination of both, because the ketones will be used as fuel, especially when blood sugars are reduced. So because if insulin remains high and sugars remain high, the body will generally eliminate the ketones through urine. You'll urinate, you'll pee them out basically. But if your blood sugars are lower because you've been on a low carbohydrate diet, the ketones will remain for a longer period of time and replace glucose as a primary fuel. And it's the replacement of the glucose with the ketone bodies, which underlies the tremendous therapeutic effects that you see from nutritional ketosis. Dom D'Agostino at the University of South Florida has been a leader in developing ketone ester supplements that can work together with a low carbohydrate diet and really, really enhance the state of therapeutic ketosis. And this is cutting edge stuff right now. And but I think in the future it's going to be a recognized approach to managing a broad range of chronic diseases, including these acute viral attacks. Just making the body stronger so we can withstand the adverse effects of the virus. Protect the brain. Let's be honest. We want to protect our brain from following these kinds of events. And therapeutic ketosis with ketone supplements is the way to go in my mind.
And I think it's interesting to look into. Maybe there needs to be a call for some clinical trials. Maybe you guys know someone that could look into this for a prophylactic, to prevent this kind of viral infection that causes these really severe reactions,
Well, I think so. I mean, right now, if you look in the literature, there's nothing on this. There's no publications or anything.
How come we can't do clinical trials? Why is it so hard? There's just not a lot of money for this type of approach?
No, I don't think that's the case. I think that the approach is not even recognized. So, you can't do a clinical trial if the majority of the people in the field don't recognize the issue. Once you recognize the power of what I've just said, a trial could be done very quickly because ketone supplements are already available. And Dom D'Agostino and others, and certain ketogenic diets, these guys could work together. You just have to have the recognition about this. And this is not generally known. I mean, some people have made some mention about this, but it's generally not known. If you go to the virologists, the immunologists, and these folks, they probably don't know about this, or if they do know it, they never really considered how this could be a therapeutic modality, which would bring the population back to a healthier state quicker. Because the key is, how are we going to get everybody back to work and not worry about a virus infection? And this is one of the ways that could possibly be done. They'll be used for this.
Yeah, and I think, I see all these people doing these expert press conferences from the government, and never do they ever mention anything about nutrition that I've heard of. And I think that should be the first thing we talk about. Let food be thy medicine, right? Hippocrates.
Yeah. Well, don't forget, it's clear they've mentioned many, many times on the news press that individuals with comorbidities like obesity and type 2 diabetes, these folks are more at risk than folks that aren't in these conditions. And nutritional ketosis targets these comorbidities, which would obviously make them more resistant to viruses. So to me, it's a no-brainer, but apparently it's just not well recognized or discussed. We haven't heard anything about it.
Well, it's like you said, there's so much bureaucratic drift in one direction. And just speaking, you talked about the standard of care for cancer. But when it comes to nutrition, this is just my perspective saying this, that, you've got the USDA and these groups that are supposed to be making recommendations, but they've got a lot of support from big wheat and big sugar and big soy and big corn and big carbohydrate. That's what it's about. And so, if they start saying, hey, folks, I just got an announcement of the White House. We're going to ask people, if you want to get back to work, let's get everybody looking at lowering their carbohydrate down to 20 carbs or less, or 30 carbs or whatever, 50 carbs, something, as depending on how, let's try to promote this as a way that oh my goodness, can you imagine the calls from big wheat and big sugar?
But people want to get back to work as well. I mean, the bottom line is the economy is going to suffer immensely. And I think, everyone is trying to do whatever they can, to get people back to work. And right now it's the testing issue. But even with the testing issue, if you knew you had a physiology that would protect you, and you knew everyone else in the same group could do a similar kind of thing, get people back to work in a healthy state. You don't want to go back to work with sick people, for sure. And I'm just throwing this out because there's a massive amount of biological and biochemistry evidence to support what I'm saying. This is not it's just people haven't connected the dots yet. And I think when they connect the dots, this could be a way to get the nation back to work. One of many ways. It's not the only way, of course, but it's certainly a way that could help people withstand the adverse effects of the virus, keep their physiology, and if they have the virus, they don't have to suffer as much as some other individuals would suffer. And I think nobody wants to suffer. And if you knew listen, if I were to be, I would do therapeutic ketosis myself, just like a lot of people would do. Like, you can check with Dr. D'Agostino. He's a world expert on this, on the physiology of this, as well as others. And these folks have knowledge that should be tapped into.
Yeah, and one of our flagship stations here in Tampa, St. Petersburg, 1040 AM, covers USF. So we'll have to talk to Dominic D'Agostino and have him on the show here soon. But do you see that? Let me put it this way: someone who's over 65 or whatever, maybe they've been eating the standard American diet with massive amount of carbohydrates. How long would they have to be in a therapeutic ketosis state? I know we're not talking about making any medical advice. We're just talking about in the science of it. How long do you have to be in ketosis to see the effects of autophagy, of cleaning up the bad cells, which are the foundation for a lot of problems?
Yeah, well, this is important, a very important point. And you can do it pretty quick. As long as you can restrict the carbohydrates that you take into the diet, your body will start mobilizing fats from the body, and therefore that goes to the liver, and the liver makes the ketone bodies. this will take about a day or two, but you don't have to stop eating. You just have to switch from a high carb diet to a very low carb diet. And then at the same time, take the ketone supplements, which are now being developed. This will bring you into a state of ketosis relatively quick, within a few days. And then you can use the glucose ketone index that we published. And Amazon sells the ketone glucose monitors that are either Precision Extra or Keto Mojo or these kinds. You can buy them from Amazon. And individuals can measure their own ratio of glucose to ketones and know right away whether they're in therapeutic ketosis. So it's just like the same little blood prick they want to take on your finger to determine whether or not you have the COVID-19. Well, you just do the same thing to measure your blood sugar and ketones, and you know right away whether you're in ketosis or not. So all this is very rapid, and it's all available. It just has to be put together.
Well, Dr. Seyfried, it's always a pleasure to hear from you, and keep up your excellent work. Very inspirational. We're going to keep following your work and getting your message out to everyone we know. Thanks for what you're doing.
Well, thank you, David. Nice talking to you.
We'll continue live on A Neighbor's Choice, talking about occupational licensing up next, and how is this time to revisit that question.
If you're living with diabetes and using insulin, you know the pain of pricking your fingers over and over again. Ouch! Well, by wearing a small remote device called a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, you can reduce the pain of pricking your fingers. Here's what our customers had to say.
Painless. No more pricking my finger.
No finger pricks.
Convenience. They delivered it free and they took care of all the paperwork.
If you're testing your blood sugar 4 or more times per day, injecting insulin 3 or more times per day, or using an insulin pump, a CGM can help you. It's accurate, easy to use, and if you have Medicare, you can get a new CGM at little or no out-of-pocket cost. Plus, get free shipping of your new CGM, and we can bill Medicare for you.
Honestly, I had my doubts, but that new CGM is painless.
Call now. 800-808-5181. 800-808-5181. 800-808-5181. That's 800-808-5181.
Hello, this is Jeff Stanislaw with The Jeff Stanislaw Show. I'd like to invite you to join me and Lou Piniella at the Lou Piniella Celebrity Golf Classic. It's being held on February 16th and 17th at Carrollwood Country Club. Lou Piniella is bringing all his friends out to play golf for a great cause with Score International. For more information on sponsorships and to play, visit loupinellagolf.org. That's loupinellagolf.org.
They say it should be impossible for bumblebees to fly because their wings are too small for their bodies. But bumblebees don't care. They just fly. Bright Expectations is dedicated to helping our Florida residents with special needs and unique abilities find the resources, support, and inspiration that they and their families need to break barriers and achieve their dreams. Visit www.brightexpectations.com to start your journey today.
This message is sponsored by the Florida Department of Health, the Florida Association of Broadcasters, and this radio station.
Back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornoski, your host. So glad you could be with us here on Friday, the end of another work week. And I hope for those who are, because of choices that are not up to them, choices of busybody government, want to be, heroes, that if you're out of work, that you find work or can get back to work as soon as possible, and let it be a lesson learned that we cannot trust central planners to run our lives. They simply don't know what they're doing. Their job, they spend their whole lives learning how to do the art of persuasion, the art of marketing and PR, and all the little tricks that make people puff up and feel emotions. Their job is to mitigate the risk of being blamed for problems and to bring out all of the problems that are being solved, all the things that are positive, and take credit for them when they didn't do anything to do those things. So that's why we can't rely on politicians to think for ourselves. we have to think for ourselves. And so I want to turn to an issue that I think is a very important issue that doesn't get enough media attention, which is the issue of occupational licensing. And this current situation that we find ourselves in, the pandemic, is an opportunity to really revisit this issue with fresh eyes. And I saw a piece in The Atlantic says unlicensed haircuts are only the beginning. It's by Paul Sherman, who is an attorney at the Institute for Justice. Paul, how you doing?
Doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing great, and it's great to have you on. I wanted to get you to kind of give us a little bit of an understanding about this issue. First, just tell folks, what occupational licensing is, and then why you want to visit this with fresh eyes.
Certainly. So, most people are familiar with the idea that there's a certain amount of licensing out there for people who work in certain jobs, whether it's doctors or I'm a lawyer, so lawyers have to pass the bar. But most people don't know the extent to which occupational licensing has grown. So in the 1950s, only about 5% of workers needed a license from the government to work in their chosen occupation. Today, that number is about 25%, and it's growing. And we're seeing more and more occupations being swept up in this. We've got everything from florists in Louisiana who need a license from the government, interior designers in Florida, people who sell caskets in Oklahoma. And what these laws really serve to do is not protect the public, but to insulate incumbent businesses from honest competition.
Now, one of the first things I hear when I tell people you don't need occupational licensing is that they say, well, I want my experts, I want my plumber, I want my doctor, I want these people, my haircut person to have a certification that they're real and not just a scam artist or something. So what would you say to folks who are saying that's why they don't buy this argument, that we need to look at getting rid of these?
Well, I think this is a situation where if there's consumer demand for something, the market is going to provide it. There's consumer demand for competent professionals, and it's simply a failure of imagination to think that we're not going to have a way to evaluate professionals if we don't have government occupational licensure. You can imagine systems of private certification that would provide people with all of the information that they need without the government shutting people out of business. And in fact, there are lots of private certifying agencies that give people credentials that are more restrictive. They're harder to get than the government license.
So has that ever been demonstrated, that there's been private market organizations providing the same effects of quality service and certification without using government monopoly bureaucracies?
Yeah, so you can look at situations like with physicians, right? So physicians, if you want to be a doctor, you have to be licensed by the state. But if you want to be a successful doctor, if you want to go out and be hired by hospitals, you have to be board certified. And these certifying boards are private organizations. They set their own standards for who meets their qualifications, and they're quite stringent. So people work hard to achieve those standards so that they can have jobs out in the marketplace. And you see similar things with lawyers. There are people who are certified trial specialists. There are people who are certified in other subspecialties of the law. None of this is administered by the state, but it sends valuable signals to consumers.
So one of the things that you were talking about, haircuts need to be looked at without licensing. Can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's just an example of the extent to which occupational licensure has grown. So if you want to cut hair anywhere in this country, you need to be licensed either as a barber or as a cosmetologist. And becoming licensed can require hundreds or even thousands of hours of education and training at a cost of thousands of dollars. And the question is, what value are we getting for that level of regulation? Now, certainly there are health and safety risks with cutting people's hair or with dyeing people's hair, and there are sanitation concerns. But these are the kinds of things that can be mitigated with a weekend class on sanitation. Someone shouldn't have to go into debt before they can wield a pair of scissors and try to earn a living for themselves.
So do you think there should still be mandates from the government about making you take sanitation classes? Or are you saying, no, if we get government out of the way, organizations will come about in the market because consumers will demand some accountability and those organizations will rise up to provide third-party verification?
Well, so, personally, I'm a libertarian, and I think that the free market could handle this on its own. But at the same time, if the government wants to pass reasonably tailored health and safety regulations, I don't have a big problem with that. The problem that I have is when industry insiders get together and try to raise barriers to competition so that they can charge monopoly rents. And when you look at these licenses, when you look at floristry licensing in Louisiana, it wasn't like consumers got together and demanded that florists be licensed. The licensing is pushed for by the industry itself. And I think that tells you everything you need to know about who benefits from the licensure. It's not the consumers, it's the incumbent businesses.
Well, see, and that's the thing, though. You know, like you said, in theory, you like the idea of maybe a minimal sanitation requirement that the government puts, but it's always the devil's in the details, because when those laws are worked out, what starts off as a little light touch always gets the foxes guarding the hen house, where they come in and tuck in little things to cripple the little guys, right? It always happens.
Yeah, well, and I think this is why we need meaningful judicial review of these kinds of licensing laws. And unfortunately, the approach that the U.S. Supreme Court has taken to these issues for about the last 75 to 80 years is that if you are asserting a right to earn an honest living, basically any government justification for a regulation will suffice, no matter how absurd, no matter how factually baseless. And it really treats your right to earn a living as a second-class right as compared to other rights like the right to speak. And as a result of this judicial abdication, we've seen this explosive growth in occupational licensing. So, I think there's a kind of a two-pronged approach. We would want to see the market take over a greater role, but we also want courts to be able to step in and look skeptically at these laws and say, is this really serving a legitimate health and safety purpose, or is this really about protecting people from competition?
Yeah, and I think that's where it gets really tricky, because it seems like these governments, they're always surrounded by an impenetrable wall of special interests. And whenever there's an appetite for a good-meaning, light-touch regulation, those special interests just literally overwhelm the public servants with lots and lots of motivations to go in their direction rather than to the little guy. But let's continue to unpack this in just a moment. We'll continue with Paul Sherman, an attorney with the Institute for Justice, talking about occupational licensing. Maybe this is a time to get rid of some of these things and get the market back to work.
Hi, I'm Dr. Michael Lang, board-certified optometric physician and certified nutritional specialist, host of popular talk show Ask the Doctor. I've researched and developed an amazing new omega-3 product that you'll see incredible results with. It's called Fortify Super Omega-3 Max. I had one of the top Norwegian omega-3 research teams in conjunction with myself and Fortify Vitamins aid in the development of this advanced omega-3. This product is the most potent and purest triglyceride form omega-3 in the United States today. Omega-3 is great for all aspects of your health and well-being, especially in this unprecedented, challenging time. I am giving a 25% discount with promo code RADIO during this viral pandemic. Go to my website, fortify.com. That's FORTIFEYE. Remember the EYE in Fortify. That's fortify.com. Enter the promo code RADIO to receive the 25% discount.
And now, the fine folks at House of Painters are reminding motorists to save the text message for when it's not going to cause an accident. Put down your cell phone and never text and drive. This safety tip is brought to you courtesy of House of Painters, our #1 most trusted painting, pressure washing, and refinishing service. Call them for a free estimate at 941-822-3234. That's 941-822-3234. That's House of Painters, reminding you to never text and drive.
The Army National Guard plays a vital role in your community. We're on the front lines supporting essential personnel first responders, law enforcement, and medical professionals, delivering food, supplies, and medicine, keeping communities safe, making a difference. During emergencies, we're always ready, always there. Learn more about part-time service in the Army National Guard at nationalguard.com.
Sponsored by the Florida Army National Guard. Aired by the Florida Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Marcus Scott Impact Realty Tampa Bay is on the air saluting the brave men and women of our U.S. military. This proud salute is brought to you by Marcus Scott Impact Realty Tampa Bay. Give them a call today at 724-219-1604. That's 724-219-1604. That's Marcus Scott Impact Realty Tampa Bay, proudly saluting our troops, veterans, and first responders, professionals, and people who care.
Sometimes a family needs a little help to deal with life stresses. You can contribute to happy, healthy childhoods with a few simple steps. Notice families under stress. Offer a helping hand. Give your time. Talk about healthy child development. Connect a family with resources. Contributing to a great childhood can be as easy as being a good neighbor. For more, preventchildabusefl.org. This message is sponsored by the Ounce of Prevention Fund of Florida, the Florida Association of Broadcasters, and this radio station.
It's Friday. We're having a great time on A Neighbor's Choice. Hope you are as well. Glad you could be with us here in our neighborhoods here in Central Florida. I'm David Gornoski, your host, and we're talking with Paul Sherman. He's an attorney for the Institute for Justice, which focuses on economic liberty. And you've got a new story in The Atlantic, Paul, that I think people need to read about why we need to really take another look at getting rid of occupational licensing.
Yeah, so, what got me thinking, so the Institute for Justice challenges occupational licensing laws, and I've worked there for about 14 years working on these issues. What got me thinking about this now is that what we're seeing is that states are not able to respond quickly enough to the problems of coronavirus, specifically because of the licensing restrictions that they've imposed on healthcare workers. And states are starting to realize that, and they are taking action to make it easier to get into the marketplace. So, for example, Indiana has basically made it so that anyone who's licensed to practice medicine anywhere in the country can have immediate reciprocity in the state of Indiana. Other states are lifting restrictions on things like telemedicine. In Florida, which actually I am from Central Florida originally, Florida has removed the restriction that requires an in-person physical exam before a doctor can certify you for medical marijuana. If these things are good ideas now, when we're in the midst of this pandemic, maybe they were always good ideas. Maybe they're going to be good ideas after the pandemic is over. And so I think this is a situation where we have a crisis, but we also have an opportunity to shake up the status quo in ways that we might not be able to were it not for the necessity being forced on us.
And then you look at all the different things you need. You need so much money and licensing requirements for starting something like a travel company, right? So little guys can't come in there and disrupt and innovate and create new wealth and cheaper products or better products for people. And it entrenches a favored crony class, and then they get bailed out whenever there's a problem, right? So it's just, and then we get blamed for being too free. You had too much freedom. You had too much free markets. Yeah. Try starting something as innocuous as a travel company, right? And you go look into how much it costs. The little guy can't get a shot,
And sometimes it's literally impossible. One of the things that people don't realize about occupational licensing is that states vary wildly in the occupations that they license. So I mentioned Louisiana licensing florists. Louisiana is the only state in the country that licensed florists. So let's say you were a successful florist in California for years and years and years, and then you relocate to Louisiana. Well, you just can't be a florist until you have passed their licensing exam. And for a long time, they actually had a subjective portion of it where you had to assemble flower arrangements, and they were judged by your future competitors. And not surprisingly, the passage rate for this test was lower than the passage rate for the Louisiana bar.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And what are some things happening in we got a lot of listeners in Florida. I've seen that they've indicated some interest in doing some occupational licensing reform. What have you heard from your work in the Institute?
Yeah, so the current governor of Florida has shown that he's very interested in this problem of occupational licensure, and he's taking it very seriously. There's some legislation that has passed through the state legislature, which I believe is awaiting the signature of the governor, dealing with a number of different licensed occupations, everything from people who give dietary advice to people who work in interior design. 10 years ago, people were not paying as much attention to this issue. And I think in large part due to the work of the Institute for Justice and some of the empirical work that we've managed to pull together, people are starting to realize that these laws impose massive costs on consumers. They cost consumers about $200 billion a year. And there's just not strong evidence that they provide the kind of health and safety benefits that would justify that kind of cost.
So what can people do to show or get more involved and learn more about the case against occupation licensure and maybe do something about it if they're tired of having so many barriers to start a business and then be lectured to? It's one of the things I just gets really annoying to me is these little folks that live in elitist, rich enclaves that are always bashing and railing against capitalism. They call it late stage capitalism. And people in real America, when they try to start a business, try to start a hair salon, they get guns pointed at them if they don't have I know my friend Isis Brantley in Texas. She did African ancestral hair braiding, and they pointed guns at her for had nothing to do with the kind of lessons that you have to go through with the state hair law, So tell folks a little bit about where they can get involved and learn more about this.
Yeah, well, certainly anyone who's interested in this issue, I would urge you to go to our website, www.ij.org. We've got a wealth of information about occupational licensure. And in particular, you can Google a recent study that we released called License to Work 2. It is the second edition of it. It looks at licensure in 102 low and middle income occupations. And it really shows the cost and the burden that these impose. It's not just about doctors and lawyers, although, I think licensure goes overboard for them. There's a lot of people who are just trying to get their foot on the first rung of the economic ladder, and occupational licensure laws are making it impossible. So educate yourself about the issue and then make your voice heard. Contact your legislators and tell them that this is something you want them to take seriously. And this is not a partisan issue. In 2015, the Obama administration released an economic report that was talking about how states have systematically ignored the costs of these laws and that they need to take a harder look at them. So whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, this is something that affects you directly, and this is something that your legislators need to hear about.
Thanks, Paul Sherman, Institute for Justice. Check them out. Let's look at this issue. It's time to get rid of these licenses and get back to work. I'm David Gornoski. We'll see you in just a moment. Godspeed.